April 20th, 1945. The Harz Forest, Germany. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, tastes of cordite. For 20-year-old Helga Schmidt, a signals clerk with the Wehrmacht's 11th Army, the world has shrunk to the shudder of the ground beneath her feet. Every few minutes, a percussive crump from the west reminds them that the American Ninth Army is not a myth, not a specter from a propaganda broadcast, but a tide of steel and fire grinding its way through the mountains. The trees themselves seem to hold their breath. The birds have long since fled. All that remains is the whisper of the wind and the distant, rhythmic cough of artillery. Helga huddles in a shallow trench scraped behind a command half-track, her fingers stiff inside thin wool gloves. The headset feels welded to her ears, the crackle of static a constant, meaningless hiss. The net is dead. For 3 days there have been no coherent orders, only fragmented reports of breakthroughs, encirclements, and units that simply cease to exist. Her commanding officer, a gaunt Oberleutnant with eyes that have seen too much, paced for an hour before sitting down heavily against a tree, his Mauser pistol resting across his knees. He hasn't spoken since. He just stares at the dark trunks of the firs, as if expecting them to offer a solution. You are here, in this final pocket of a dying Reich. You have been told your entire life that you are the wall against the Untermensch, the barbarian hordes from east and west. You have been shown films of the Americans, crude, gum-chewing gangsters who defile everything they touch. Dr. Goebbels' voice, smooth and certain, has promised you that capture, especially for a German woman, is a fate worse than death. It is a sentence of unspeakable violation, a descent into an animal's existence. This fear is a physical thing, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach that has been tightening for weeks. It is more real than the hunger, more present than the exhaustion. A sudden snap of a twig makes everyone flinch. A young soldier, no older than 16, stumbles into the clearing. His face is pale, smeared with dirt. "They're here," he gasps, his voice cracking. "Tanks, on the Ridge Road." The Oberleutnant rises slowly, his movements weary. He looks at his handful of soldiers, at the 2 signals auxiliaries, Helga and her friend Elke. There is no defiance in his face, only a profound, bottomless fatigue. He unbuckles his pistol belt and lets it fall to the pine needles on the forest floor. The metal clinks softly. It is the sound of surrender. The first American soldier Helga sees does not look like a monster. He looks impossibly tall, impossibly well-fed. His uniform is a clean olive drab, not the threadbare field gray of her comrades. He holds an M1 Garand rifle, and he moves with an easy confidence that seems alien. He chews gum, just like in the newsreels, but his eyes are not cruel. They are just tired. Another soldier, a sergeant with stripes on his sleeve, gestures with his rifle. "Okay, Krauts, aufstehen, on your feet, raus." The words are harsh, but the tone is impatient, not sadistic. They are marched out of the trees and onto the narrow road. The sight steals Helga's breath. A column of Sherman tanks and M3 half-tracks stretches as far as she can see, their engines rumbling with a power that seems capable of shaking the mountains apart. GIs and helmets watch them pass, their faces a mixture of curiosity, boredom, and contempt. No one speaks to her. No one even looks at her for more than a second. She is just another piece of a broken army, another part of the day's work. She keeps her eyes fixed on the muddy boots of the man in front of her, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. The fear is a living thing now, clawing at her throat. Every newsreel, every warning, every whispered horror story screams in her mind. This is it. This is the beginning of the end. They are herded toward the back of a large canvas-covered GMC truck. A soldier with a clipboard shouts out numbers in broken German. Helga and Elke cling to each other, 2 small figures in a sea of defeated men. As she is pushed toward the backtail, she risks a glance back at the forest, at the last piece of Germany she might ever see. It is silent now, a dark, indifferent wall of green. The engine roars to life, and the truck lurches forward, carrying her away from everything she has ever known and into the terrifying abyss of the unknown. The journey west is a blur of suffocating crowds and grinding steel. From the Harz Mountains, the truck deposits them in a vast, muddy field enclosed by barbed wire. Thousands of German soldiers stand in ragged lines, their faces blank with shock and resignation. Here, the process of becoming a prisoner of war begins. It is a process of systematic dehumanization. They are stripped of their equipment, their paybooks confiscated, their personal letters and photographs tossed into a bonfire that burns with a chemical stench. Helga watches a young officer weep as a grinning GI pockets his silver watch. The guards are efficient, impersonal. They are not the monsters of the propaganda, but they are not saviors either. They are simply men doing a job, processing human cargo. Days bleed into nights in the open-air enclosure, a place the Americans call a cage. Rain turns the ground to a slick, cold mud that seeps into their clothes and bones. Food is scarce. A few hard biscuits, a tin of something called Spam. The German command structure has evaporated. There is only the law of the strong, the desperate. Helga and Elke stay together, guarding their small bundle of possessions, speaking only in whispers. The fear, once a sharp spike, has dulled into a constant throbbing ache. The stories circulate in hushed tones, fueled by terror and uncertainty. Rumors of what happens to the women in the permanent camps, of what the American Negro soldiers are allowed to do. Every rumor confirms the warnings of the Reich. Finally, they are moved again. Packed into wooden cattle cars, they are shunted onto a train that rattles endlessly westward. Through the cracks in the boards, Helga catches glimpses of her homeland. She sees cities that are nothing but skeletal ruins, landscapes pockmarked by bomb craters. She sees German civilians staring at the train with hollow eyes, their faces reflecting a defeat so total it feels like the end of history. There is no pity in their expressions, only a shared, silent misery. The train ride is a week-long descent into a kind of sensory deprivation, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the wheels and the groans of the men packed around them. The destination is a port city. Le Havre, someone whispers. The air suddenly smells of salt and diesel. They are marched onto the docks, past mountains of American supplies, crates of ammunition, barrels of fuel, pyramids of canned food. The sheer scale of the Allied war machine is staggering, a physical manifestation of why they lost. It crushes what little spirit remains. And then she sees the ship. It is not a grand ocean liner, but a gray utilitarian vessel, a Liberty ship named the SS Samuel Chase. Rust streaks its hull like dried blood. It looks like a floating warehouse, vast and menacing. The crossing is 17 days of purgatory. The women are segregated into a cramped, poorly ventilated hold below the waterline. 3-tiered bunks are cramped so tightly together there is barely room to stand. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and vomit. The constant groaning motion of the ship is a physical torture. For the first week, Helga is so seasick she can barely move, her body racked with dry heaves. The Atlantic is a merciless gray void. There is no land, no sun, only the heaving sea and the groaning of the ship's metal plates. You are in the belly of the beast, crossing an ocean you never imagined you would see. You are a ghost, suspended between a world that is dead and one that you cannot comprehend. The propaganda now feels like a prophecy. They were told the Americans would take them far from their homeland, to a place where they would be forgotten, where their screams would never be heard. Now, surrounded by this endless water, it feels undeniably true. One afternoon, a guard brings down a bucket of water. He is a young man, perhaps younger than Helga, with a spray of freckles across his nose. He doesn't look at them. He just sets the bucket down and turns to leave. A woman, bolder than the rest, asks in broken English, "Where we go?" The soldier pauses at the hatchway. He looks back, not at the woman who spoke, but at the mass of pale, frightened faces staring up at him from the gloom. He hesitates, then says one word, a word that sounds strange, alien, mythical. Texas. He says it not with malice, but with a flat finality, as if naming a distant, inescapable planet. And then he is gone, leaving the women to whisper the strange word to each other in the dark. Texas. It means nothing to them. It is just a sound, a name for the abyss they are sailing toward. The sight of land is a shock to the system. After weeks of nothing but the shifting gray horizon of the Atlantic, the low green coastline of Virginia appears like a dream. As the SS Samuel Chase is guided into the harbor at Newport News, the women are herded onto the deck. Helga squints against the unfamiliar brightness of the sun, and she stares, speechless, at the world they have entered. It is a world without ruins. The buildings are whole, their windows intact, their roofs unscarred by fire. Brightly colored automobiles, impossibly sleek and shiny, glide down clean, wide streets. People walk with a purpose and energy she hasn't seen in years. They are dressed in vibrant clothes. They are not thin. They are not haunted. The America she sees from the deck of the ship is not the decadent, crumbling society described by the propaganda. It is a civilization at the peak of its power, a place utterly untouched by the war that has consumed her own world. The sheer, overwhelming reality of it is a psychological blow more powerful than any weapon. It is the silent, irrefutable proof of their defeat. They were not fighting gangsters. They were fighting this land of giants, this inexhaustible wellspring of strength. The fear she felt before was of the unknown, of barbarism. The fear she feels now is of this impossible, alien modernity. It is the fear of total insignificance. Disembarking is another exercise in organized chaos. They are marched down the gangplank under the watchful eyes of military police, their faces stern and unreadable under their white helmet liners. The air is warm and heavy with a humidity that feels like a wet blanket. The sounds are different. The high-pitched whine of unfamiliar insects, the distant wail of a train horn that plays a different tune from the ones in Germany. They are processed again, their names checked against lists, their bodies dusted with a fine white delousing powder that makes them cough and choke. Helga feels like an insect, a parasite being cleansed before it can contaminate this pristine new world. Then comes the second train. It is nothing like the suffocating cattle cars of Europe. This train has windows. They are seated, two to a bench, in a carriage that is worn but clean. As the train pulls away from the coast, it begins a slow, epic journey across the continent. For days, Helga is glued to the window, watching a country unfold that is larger and more varied than she could have ever imagined. First, the rolling green hills and dense forests of the east, dotted with tidy farmhouses and small towns that look like illustrations from a storybook. Then the landscape flattens, opening up into plains so vast they seem to go on forever, under a sky that is impossibly huge and blue. They pass through great cities whose names she recognizes, Chicago, St. Louis, seeing them only as a blur of towering buildings and a web of railway lines. The other women are mostly silent, lost in their own thoughts, overwhelmed by the scale of it all. The American guards on the train are older men, reservists by the look of them. They are not unkind. They distribute food, white bread sandwiches with thick slices of meat and cheese, apples, bottles of a sweet, dark, fizzy drink called Coca-Cola. It is more food than Helga has seen at one time in years. The simple act of being fed, of being treated with a basic functional decency, is profoundly disorienting. It doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't align with the terror that has been her constant companion. As the train moves further south and west, the world outside the window changes again. The lush green gives way to a scrubbier, tougher landscape. The grass is brown, the trees are gnarled and thorny. The sun beats down with a relentless, punishing intensity. The heat in the carriage becomes oppressive. Dust seeps in through the window frames, coating everything in a fine red film. This is a hard, unforgiving land. It feels primeval. This, she realizes, must be Texas. The word no longer sounds mythical. It feels like the sun-baked ground and the endless sky outside. Finally, after a journey that seems to have lasted a lifetime, the train begins to slow. It screeches and groans to a halt beside a small, dusty siding. There is no grand station, just a wooden platform and a simple sign nailed to a post. In black letters, it reads, "Camp Swift." The doors slide open, and a wave of dry, searing heat rolls in. This is the end of the line. This is the place they were warned about. The final leg of the journey is in the back of a U.S. Army CCKW truck, a deuce and a half, that kicks up a plume of ochre dust as it rumbles down a long, unpaved road. The sun is a merciless white disk in the sky, and the heat is a physical presence pressing down on them, stealing the air from their lungs. Through the dust, Helga can see the camp rising from the flat, scrubby terrain. It is a city of barbed wire. Endless rows of single-story wooden barracks, stark and utilitarian, stretch across the landscape, shimmering in the heat haze. Guard towers stand like skeletal sentinels at the corners of the vast enclosure. This is it. This is the picture that has haunted her nightmares for months, made real under the blinding Texas sun. The truck groans to a halt before a set of administrative buildings near the entrance to the women's compound. An American officer with a clipboard shouts in English, and a translator relays the order in flat, tired German. "Out! Get your belongings. Form a line here." The women climb stiffly down from the truck bed, their bodies aching from the long journey. They are a small, bedraggled group, blinking in the harsh light, their gray camp dresses already dark with sweat. Helga clutches her only possession, a small canvas duffel bag, worn and stained, containing a spare set of underclothes, a thin blanket, a bar of soap, and the small leather-bound diary she has managed to keep hidden. The bag feels impossibly heavy. Exhaustion, a deep, bone-crushing weariness from weeks of travel and fear, suddenly overwhelms her. Her hands, slick with sweat, lose their grip. The canvas bag slips from her fingers and falls to the dusty ground with a soft thud. The clasp bursts open, spilling its meager contents into the red dirt. Her neatly folded clothes, her precious soap, and the diary, her last connection to herself, lie exposed in the dust. A wave of humiliation and despair washes over her. She is too tired to even cry. She just stares at her pathetic belongings, unable to move. The other women shuffle past, their eyes averted. No one can afford to show weakness. No one dares to draw attention to themselves. Helping a clumsy comrade is a risk they are not willing to take. Helga sinks to her knees, her fingers trembling as she tries to gather her things. The dust clings to the fabric, smudging the cover of her diary. And then, a pair of boots stops beside her. Large, brown leather boots, scuffed with dust. She freezes, her heart hammering against her ribs. She slowly looks up. He is an American sergeant, a master sergeant, judging by the 3 stripes up and 2 down on his sleeve. He is not young. His face is weathered, deeply tanned, with fine lines etched around his eyes. His hair, visible under the edge of his garrison cap, is graying at the temples. He looks tired, like he's been standing in this sun for 1,000 years. He does not look like a monster. He just looks like a man. He doesn't speak. He doesn't shout at her to hurry up. He simply crouches down, his knees cracking softly in the silence. His large, calloused hands move with a surprising gentleness. He picks up the blanket, shakes the dust from it, and folds it into a neat square. He gathers the clothes. He picks up the bar of soap. Then, his eyes fall on the diary. For a moment, Helga is certain he will confiscate it, read it, mock her. But he just picks it up carefully, as if it were something of value, and brushes the red dust from its cover.
He places everything back in the bag, fastens the clasp, and stands up. He looks down at her, still kneeling in the dirt. Helga braces herself for a command, a curse, a blow. Instead, he offers her a hand. Tentatively, she takes it. His grip is firm, dry, and strong. He pulls her effortlessly to her feet. He holds the bag in his other hand. He gives her a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turns and begins walking toward the barracks, carrying her bag for her. The simple, silent act is so profoundly unexpected it short-circuits her brain. She can only stand there, watching him walk away, her terror momentarily eclipsed by a stunning, world-altering confusion.
Inside the barracks, the air is stifling, filled with the smell of raw pine and tar paper. The building is a long, open room lined with 2 rows of simple metal cots. It is clean. There are windows that can be opened to catch the slightest breeze. It is a palace compared to the ship's hold or the muddy fields of Germany. The women find their bunks, claiming their small spaces in this new reality. A low buzz of conversation fills the room, and Helga knows they are all talking about the same thing: the American sergeant, the man who helped, the man who carried the bag. It was a small thing, a gesture that probably took him less than a minute, an act he likely forgot the moment he turned away. But for these women, steeped for years in a mythology of hate and fear, it was a seismic event. Helga sits on the edge of her cot, the thin mattress springs creaking beneath her. The sergeant had set her bag down at the foot of the bed before walking out without a word. She runs her hand over the canvas, the spot where his hand had been. She feels a strange mix of emotions: relief, shame, and a disorientation so profound it makes her feel dizzy. The fear she has carried for so long, the monstrous certainty about her fate, has been punctured. Not by a grand proclamation of mercy, but by a quiet, ordinary act of human decency. It is a crack in the foundation of her world. She opens her diary. The pages are filled with the frantic, fearful scribbles of the past few months. She finds a blank page and uncaps her pen. Her hand hovers over the paper, unsure where to begin. How do you describe the collapse of a universe? How do you put into words the realization that the truths you were prepared to die for are lies? You try to reconcile the image of the leering, brutal American gangster from the posters with the face of the tired, middle-aged sergeant who knelt in the dust to help you. The 2 images cannot coexist. One of them must be false, and she knows with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty which one it is. They told us we would be met with barbarism, she writes, her script shaky. They told us we would be treated like animals. But the first true act of kindness I have received in months, perhaps in years, came from the hand of an enemy soldier. The words seem inadequate, yet they are all she has. This one small act begins to reframe everything. The journey on the train, the clean carriages, the sandwiches, the apples. She had dismissed them as anomalies, as some strange American custom, before the true horror began. Now she sees them differently. It was not a fluke, it was a system that, for all its impersonality, was not designed for cruelty. In the days and weeks that follow, life at Camp Swift settles into a routine. The food is plentiful and nutritious. They are assigned work details, in the laundry, in the kitchens, tending vegetable gardens under the relentless Texas sun. The work is hard, but it is purposeful. The guards are a mix of personalities. Some are stern and distant, others are young and curious, trying out their few words of German. But there is no systematic brutality. There are rules, regulations, and a clear, predictable order. The world, which had been a chaotic nightmare of violence and fear, is suddenly structured and safe. It is the deepest of ironies. She has found a measure of peace as a prisoner, 1,000 miles from home, in the heart of the nation she was taught to despise. Helga never saw that specific sergeant again. He was just one man among thousands on a sprawling military base. But his face, his weathered hands, the quiet authority in his eyes became a symbol for her. a symbol of the vast, unspoken truth that lay buried beneath the rubble of propaganda. People were just people, some cruel, some kind, most somewhere in between, just trying to get through the day. The evil she had been trained to see in an entire nation was not there. The evil she was beginning to understand was in the training itself. One evening, she stands by the window of the barracks, looking out as the sun sets over the flat Texas horizon. The sky is a riot of orange, pink, and purple, a spectacle of beauty so vast and alien it hurts to look at. The fear is gone. In its place is a great, aching void of uncertainty. Everything she knew is gone. Her country is in ruins. Her future is a blank page. But for the first time since the forest grew silent, she is not terrified. She is just a young woman, a world away from home, watching a foreign sunset and wondering, with a strange and unfamiliar flicker of hope, what might come next.